Hey guys, we're going to look at some of the sections on the review guide. And if you're watching this and not in my class, you could purchase this at teacherspayteachers.com. And there's going to be several parts of this, but on the first part, we're going to focus on the calculator tricks up to solving equations and inequalities. So we'll go through those first 5 sections together and talk about what you need to do to complete it and how to get ready for the test. So, first section that I added on this was for some calculator tricks that you could find the answer on these questions just by using the graphing calculator. And one popular word they like to use on the Regents now is the word equivalent. So you'll see I picked several Regents questions, look for that word, underline that word. You just see it a couple times in the part 1, the multiple choice. So what you want to do when you see that, like it says up in the directions, you go to y equals, and you type in the expression in the question. So we got 16x to the 4th minus 64. And then what you want to do for y2 is type in one of the answers. So one of them, the one that's correct, is going to be, in this case, it'll be choice 3. But I'm going to type one in that's not correct. So I'm going to type in choice 1 right now. So we got 4x squared minus 8 squared. And what you want to do is, if you have your calculator set to graph-table, hitting the mode button, then you do second graph, it'll give you a picture of the graph itself and the table. And then what you're looking for, if it's the wrong answer, you'll see 2 different graphs. And if you don't see 2 different graphs, and we see 1 graph, make sure you check the table. So we have a y1 column. You want to make sure the y1 and the y2 columns are the same. And in this case, they're not. The numbers from y1 to y2 are clearly different. So like I said, 1's not the correct answer in this case, but if you do it correctly, you type in number 3, you can try that one on your own. That one's going to end up being the same graph, and the table values will match up. So that's what you want to do in the equivalent section. You just want to make sure you type it in correctly. If you don't find one that's the answer, then just go back through and check your typing and try it again, because it should be an easy couple points. And in the case of most Regents, you got 2 or 3 questions like it. So I want to move down to page 4. And then we got the idea of solutions. So if you have solution, pretty much what you want to focus on is substituting. You put in each of the answers, each of these answers here, in for x. And then what you want to do is see if what you get out on each side is the same. So I'm going to quit out of that, go to second mode. I'm not going to need y equals for this. And in the case of this question here, I'm going to try number 3. Now, remember this right here, each of these answers is 2 separate answers. There's negative 3 plus radical 7, and negative 3 minus radical 7. And you want to check both of them, make sure they end up, if you put them in, equaling 7. So like in this case, I'm going to type in that expression. You just got to be careful with parentheses, because you want to put each of those answers in parentheses, the numbers you're substituting in. So I'm going to do negative 3 plus radical 7. Okay. And you want to make sure, I kind of messed up there, you want to get out from under that radical sign. Plus 3. And then close the parentheses and square it. So that's what it should look like. You can only do one at a time. Okay, so that one I get 7. And then if you use the calculator function to bring up your old answer, just do second, enter. You can go in and just change that to a minus sign. You get 7 for that one. So that means that 3 is, for this one, 3 is the correct answer. So again, you're looking for two phrases in the solution section. Sometimes they put the word solution, and then you'll see kind of below, it'll say which value of x makes it true. And solutions are true values that make the equation equal. So now we're going to move on to rational versus irrational. And we'll look at a couple examples. And I'm going to use the calculator to illustrate it. So like if we have a rational number, okay, a rational number can be written as a whole number, or it can be converted and written as a fraction or integer. So something like 0.5 will give me a fraction. So like 0.5 is an example of a rational, be an example of a rational number. Whole numbers are rational, so something like 4, whole number 4 would be rational. Certain square roots are rational too, because if you do something like the square root of 64, in that case you get 8. So certain square roots can be rational as well. But irrational numbers, they don't end, they don't repeat. Now, if you take something like radical 2 and hit enter, you get a long decimal that's not repeating. And if you change it back to a fraction, the calculator can't change it to a fraction. So something like radical 2 is irrational. Also, if you're talking about circles, pi would be irrational as well. So as you're looking and you're using a calculator for these, see if it can be changed to a fraction or not. Can it be converted into something else? And again, whole numbers and integers are rationals as well. So let's move on for that. And you'll see certain questions on these pages that go through and ask you whether it's rational, irrational, and then may have you do some arithmetic with those rational, irrational numbers. Okay? And again, it's all about using the calculator correctly. Now for the properties section, nothing too crazy. You want to look for and remember the properties that have been talked about. So the commutative property for addition and multiplication, and I'll illustrate this with numbers. So like commutative property with addition would be something like this, where you can take the order for addition and multiplication and you can switch it around so that on each side you get the same thing. Distributive property we talk about also. Distributive property, again, you're just multiplying something to each term in the parentheses, so you get another expression that should be equal. And then with the associative property, similar to commutative property except with multiple terms, like 3 terms, so something like 3 plus 4 plus 5 would be the same as 3 plus 4 plus 5. So, and then similar to that, multiplication again, same thing. So that's what you're going to do with the properties section on this survival guide. So with the evaluating, same thing. When you're finding the solution, this kind of just brings in some different ideas, especially with things that have fractions. So you'll see on 7 through 10, there's fractions involved. In the case of if you have a fraction, something like 7, okay, you just want to make sure in the calculator that you get each side to one value. So we got 7 minus. So all I'd put in the calculator right now would be just that bottom value, 7 minus the negative 5. You want to get a separate answer for each side and then try to divide it and see if it can reduce. So what I mean with that is I would just take 7 minus parentheses negative 5. Okay, I would get 12, which I would put in the bottom. And then I'm going to check and see if I can reduce that fraction at all. And again, if I can reduce it, it'll change. If not, then I'll leave it as it is. So like that one's the same thing. That means that's the answer for 7. So again, a lot of substitution involved in this Regents. And then the last part we're going to talk about, solving equations and inequalities. So I want to look at an example, the middle one in the front here, where you got the fractions. Now if you have fractions, you can get rid of those fractions by multiplying the whole equation by the denominator. So in this case, you're distributing everything. We just talked about the distributive property. And for this one, you'd have 3x plus 8 equals 5x minus 24. Okay, and then you go from there, eliminate terms, which you would do on some of these other questions. So like subtracting the 3x's on both sides. That's a way you could start it. Add 24 to both sides. So you'd get 2x equals 32, and then divide by 2, and then x is going to be in 16. And again, when you get a solution, go back to the original, plug it in, and see if you get the same answers on each side. Use that trick we talked about before, because you can use that trick after you get an answer to make sure your work is correct. And the last part, again, with linear inequalities, one thing you got to look out for with linear inequalities, got all the symbols there written on there for you. Just make sure with the inequalities, if you divide or multiply by a negative, you want to flip those signs, the sign on the inequality. Okay. So I hope this helps with your review for the test, and good luck.